Oh my God, I need like, all right.
Ugh.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Works for my 3 kids, so great it works for you guys too. Well, hi everyone, my name is Christina Shen, and I'm a partner at Chemistry, which is a new fund that I started fairly recently with Ethan Kurzweil and Mark Goldberg, and we're a $350 million early stage venture fund leading seed and Series A. And so today I got the privilege of moderating our VC panel today. So I think I could give all the intros, but I think they will do much better intros than myself. So David, why don't you start?
Cool. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm one of the partners at Sequoia. I'm the new guy at Sequoia. I've been at Sequoia 2 years. Before joining Sequoia, I was leading the venture fund for Co2, doing seed Series A investing. And I'm on the growth fund now at Sequoia. So I've done everything from seed through late stage investing.
Hi, my name is Mar Hershenson. I'm one of the founding partners at Pear VC. We are in our 4th fund. It's a $400 million fund, and we do pre-seed and seed generalist. And before Pear, I was a founder myself, and I consider myself an engineer, deep at heart.
Great. Hey, I'm Alex Kolisic, one of the founding partners at 8VC. We're a generalist fund. We'll invest, I like to say, in almost everything. We do software, biotech, healthcare, defense, some consumer. We focus mostly on seed, Series A, Series B, and I think we have over $6 billion under management now.
Awesome. So we're going to kick this off fairly. By the way, there is Slido, which I think you guys all know. Please send your questions in, and I will make sure to try to ask as many of them as possible. But as we were chatting backstage, we said, what are we a VC panel without actually talking about AI? And so maybe I'll kick it off a little bit, which is, I'd be curious to hear where the 3 of you feel we are in the AI cycle in terms of, what did you believe 6 months ago? What do you believe today? And what do you think is going to be interesting in the next 6 to 12 months? Maybe I'll start with Mar, since you're at the earliest stage.
Well, I'm still so impressed that all we can build was generative AI, that part of me thinks we should be paying a lot of money for all the companies that come through our door. And then I realized that the fund is only this size. So I'm old. I was saying backstage that I'm old enough that I was here for the internet bubble, and then I was here for the mobile bubble. And humans always behave the same way. At the beginning, everybody rushes in, and there's this kind of peak of excitement. And I do feel that in 2023, it was crazier than today in terms of the deals that were getting done. They weren't even diligenced. I think people hadn't even thought it through. And right now, the companies that are getting invested, at least they are more thoughtful, and they have, they're going to have a higher rate of success. So that's what I think. And I know there's a lot of comparisons as to how impressive this is, and comparing it. First it was a PC, and then, the printing press, and industrial, everything is like, anyway, it's gonna be like the wheel at some point. But it is really impressive. So I think there's a lot of value to be created over the next decade.
Yeah, I've been writing about this for a couple quarters now. We're generally at the fund pretty bullish on AI in the long term. We think, there's a little bit of feedback. We think that in the short term, we're not right before, but close to the trough of disillusionment, if anybody knows the Gartner hype cycle. We're really close to the Palantir team on AIP side, so we do a good job of, I think, keeping close to the market. And there's definitely value being added in enterprise with AI applications today, but we're still early, I'd say, in that deployment cycle. If you look at model performance, it looks like it's starting to plateau. If you look at the model providers, you're starting to see convergence in performance. And so that all kind of suggests to us that the scaling laws are not, I think, going to generate any immediate performance or step function performance increases, which means I think we'll fall short in the next year, 2 or 3 of the inflated expectations of what people think. And that's really only because I think the expectations are so inflated. You can look at NVIDIA's market cap to see what the projections are. I don't think we'll quite go into that of like AI apps making billions of dollars of revenue, but I think within 5 years, we'll probably be shocked at how much has changed with AI and how real it actually is.
Well, I mean, David, you get to see it at the other end of the spectrum, being on more on the growth sides. I'm curious, like as AI companies are starting to hit your stage, people talk a lot about GPT wrappers versus, how do you stand out? How do you create a moat with AI products? I'm curious to hear your thoughts and maybe involve some of the companies you've been with.
Yeah, I would say, maybe just to calibrate, I think there have been great AI companies for the last decade. And I was lucky enough to be involved with companies like Weights and Biases and Hugging Face, and there was a generation of companies in the 2017, 2018 era that at the early days of deep learning were already talking about and thinking about what this technology was going to become. And I think it's also important, this technology is actually like live, affecting people's lives. Like John Deere's tractors use AI to spread like the fertilizer and the pesticides and all the things. So I think, we already have AI in the real world. And so I just think it's important to distinguish AI from generative AI and sort of the hype cycle that we're currently in. And I think about ChatGPT as sort of this like great instantiation of this technology and great instantiation of this idea, which is like, hey, we have computers, we're able to write software, now we're able to make these computers intelligent. And I guess my belief is that ChatGPT is going to be one of many instantiations of what this looks like. And so we may be at the peak of inflated expectations on sort of ChatGPT equals AI, but we're certainly at very early in what is actually AI. And so I think as we think about companies reaching the growth stage, the thing that we pay attention to is there a user who's ultimately getting value, right? That's the ultimate thing that you need to get to by the growth stage. And so John Deere is getting value from AI. If you have an AI widget that's in search of a market, then that hasn't created value yet. And so I think that's the tension.
And, please, Mar.
I just want to maybe say something. I know there's hype, but if we ask our portfolio companies how many of our teams are using Cursor to write code, it's going to be very high. And imagine all of us seed managers, if we could cut the engineering by half, it's a huge impact on the money that we put in. You can double the runway or you can do more with the same amount of money. So I feel that AI is here for some stuff, especially in the Valley. There's no hype. We had sat down here 2 years ago and said, hey, there's some magic thing that will cut your engineering team in half, nobody would have said, oh, yeah, you're totally right. But it's true. It's happening. I think Google said 25%. Small companies more aggressive. So I think that's a big deal. Customer support, it's definitely happening. And that's massive amount of people that are working there. So it's high, but it's also here, and once it gets adopted super rapidly, right? Anyways, not to be contrarian, but just making that point.
I mean, what I love about what we were talking about backstage, actually, is like, remember with the cloud transition, you used to have to give away 50% of your company to even turn on the lights to start your software or cloud business. And today, you can now build who knows how much faster. If it's 25% or 50% of your engineering team can be accelerated via Cursor or other such products, I think there's huge opportunities for transformation. I think as investors, the biggest challenge we're always facing is there's no doubt this platform shift with AI is going to be transformational for new companies. The question is, where does the value accrue? Another question that comes up a lot is, how do you think about what industries you think it's going to hit first? And so I'd be curious, maybe starting with Alex, are there particular industries that you think are most primed to be adopted against?
Yeah, I generally think that we're vertical software investors in the more cloud cycle. So we think about it from an industry perspective. How do you add value to the end user? And so we invest in a company called Cognition, which everybody's probably heard of, Devin, the software engineer. I think that's like one way in which you can think the applications, software stacks can be reimagined. Like you can think of these multi-agent systems existing as a standalone software company in every single vertical. I'm on the board of a company called Qualia, which is title insurance software, and we power title agents. And you can see the Devin, we call it a Patty, of the title agent. Like you could see that starting to develop today, where you'll have these multi-agent systems where the user is almost like supervising a team of employees. I kind of think that's where vertical software is going to go, and so we're particularly excited about that opportunity. Then there's the go-to-market question people are asking is, do you want to sell software or do you want to do more of like a services, AI services roll-up? I think that's more of a go-to-market question, but that's kind of how we see the application stack evolving. And then we're actually pretty bullish on vertical software itself. I think the default is that an incumbent, if they're smart, will launch, I think, the AI multi-agent system or single agent system or straight API call and deliver that AI to that industry because they have the data gravity and they have the workflow gravity. But if they stumble, I think it's like prime for somebody to come and disrupt them with this new sort of like application paradigm. That's how we're thinking about it.
All right, I'll try to get an audience question. What are your thoughts on the interfaces where agents perform actions without prompts?
Without prompts.
Without prompts. And so maybe I might reframe the question a little bit as to curious to the different ways you think we may democratize agents, where the interface is not actually a ChatGPT interface, or other ways interface that we might interact.
Well, I can envision it for regular workflow software in a vertical. You don't necessarily need a prompt. Like if we go to title insurance, which is like the most esoteric space ever, but the workflows are pretty well known, and you would know the like state diagram of like steps you have to go through for the agents to complete. And you could and the human would just be in a supervisory role. They wouldn't be necessarily commanding the AI to do what it does, because in most workflow software, the workflow is known. And so I think of the human as kind of the grader, not even like the prompter, but the grader saying, okay, you didn't do that right, or here's a piece of context you don't have. That's kind of the way I envision it.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's already happening. We have investors in a company called Orbi that basically just watches you, and then it figures out, oh, I know exactly what you're doing, and I'm going to get it done. We're also investors in a company that is looking at all this this massive industry, which is software implementation for things like SAP or whatever, and it can watch the implementation people do it and just learn and do it. So this is already happening. It's not like there are companies that don't use chatbots to do it. It might be that the customer doesn't trust it, and you have to give them a little window to stop, but it's not, with every technology, you might need that for some people, and it goes away pretty quickly.
Very cool. I mean, I'd love to switch gears a little bit. I see lots of questions about the venture industry. So we're going to switch gears a little bit over to, I mean, I'm curious to, maybe I'll tackle Mar first. The venture industry has changed a lot over the last decade or two. And in particular, a lot of funds have gotten bigger. And so I'm curious, how you think about returns as fund sizes have gotten bigger, the impact to founders as the pressure of larger raises happen, tied to larger fund sizes. I'm just paraphrasing a question here, but I'm going to target you first.
Okay, that's a very long question. So yes, venture has changed a lot. I started my first company in 1999, so that dates me. I'm the oldest person in this room, probably. But it was very different. I think in venture, there were some people in Sand Hill Road. They didn't have a website, and they just waited for founders to show up, right? That was venture. It was this merit, it was very different from our job today, which, we are salespeople, and I feel like I'm always running around chasing somebody, So I think it's going to continue to be, I believe it will continue to be more and more competitive over time. This is not an easy job. And when I tell people, is that we're in the Olympics of venture in this place. So it's getting just harder, period, for everybody in venture to return funds, because there's a lot more money in it. And there's a little bit of a I don't know if it's a physics constant or something, but there's just that many amount of great founders every year. There's just not infinite supply, and we're all chasing them. So that's in general, I would say. Now, the exits are getting larger. I think a 500 million IPO was amazing in the 90s or the early 2000s, but
how much revenue did that company have?
Exactly. But now it's not, the companies that are actually making it are really big, right? So again, I think it's transformed a little bit from a business where you could take your time to do a deal, pick your thing, and hey, you might get some exit, to like super hard picking. You have to be really good at this business, at that picking, and then doubling down on that winner, because those people are going to exit, or super big. So anyways. Sash, you have to be good. That's, that's my summary.
Well, what about well, maybe switching gears a little bit. We were talking backstage a little bit about types of founders that we get excited about and how we think about investing at the earliest stage. Maybe we go down the line a little bit, and maybe we'll start with Alex. Especially at the early stage, I mean, 8VC has been investing seed and Series A for how long now? Over a decade?
Yeah, almost, yeah.
Over a decade at this point. What do you look for in founders?
There's the common elements, and then everyone's unique in their own way. I'd say we generally skew towards technical founders in particular. So that's like number one. We like people who are technical, if we can get it. Not everybody has to be technical, but we generally prefer that. I find every founder is like a little strange as well in their own way. And so I think you have to be a little off in some dimension to want to start a company. And I think that's a good thing. I think that uniqueness is what lets people have like unique insights about a market. I think you have to be good at recruiting. You know, we call it internally resource magnetism. You have to be able to recruit capital and people to your cause. I'd say like those are the most common elements that we find.
Okay, this is my most popular question. So everybody wants to know, and I tell people that it's the same as saying, hey, how do you pick your wife? Okay, you know, it's really hard, right? Because should you date it and so on, and you want certain category, certain qualities, but there's some intangible that people are looking for, and that's great because different managers have different tastes, right? So, and in a way, that's what makes our seed funds differently. Anyways, that's what I would say. I tend to really try to understand the why they're building the company, and just know that 50% of my companies will pivot, right? But if at least they can articulate why they're building the first one, I can see how they're thinking, and that really tells me a lot. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I would definitely reiterate what Mar just said, which is that I just try to pull on this thread of like, what are we all doing here? Like, why are we doing this? And I think as you pull on that thread, you sort of get a sense for someone's life journey and what led them to this moment and why did they start this company. And I think I was chatting with actually a founder that I had the privilege of leading their Series A that recently got acquired. And we were just talking about this question of like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And I think the best companies, there's a really authentic answer to that question. Like we heard Apurva earlier, like he was going to make that company work no matter what, right? Why? And he understood that. And I think the best companies, that's why they're able to mobilize resources. That's why they're able to get capital. That's why they're able to get people, because there's a cause, there's something deeper there that they're pursuing.
I always like to learn something new in the conversation. And so, especially if it's a market I know well, if I learn something new, that's an aha moment for me, because I should never know more about your market. And the flip side is true too, which is I will always test someone, which is I will test to see if you know a lot about a particular area. And if I catch you in a lie, that's also a bad thing too. So a lot of people also ask me, what's the biggest pet peeve in a pitch? My biggest pet peeve in a pitch is when you try to over-exaggerate something that you think you know, but you probably don't know as much about. And so just remember that like it's a trust relationship. I think the marriage analogy is so perfect. It is harder to get divorced from your board partner than actually your actual significant other. So you're really stuck with us if you pick us.
Actually, I'll tell you a funny story, but you're totally right. A long time ago, Pashman and I, our website, we didn't have marketing, so we're like retelling our messaging, and we're like, we're immigrants and we love immigrants, and we have this. We like people that are, that are courageous and so on. Anyways, it was just marketing. But then we noticed that everybody that came to pitch to us had an immigrant pitch about the whole thing. So anyways, I realized. So you want to catch that as it's not true, but anyways.
We were talking about an early stage. We were talking about pivots earlier. You pivot a lot. And I'm actually curious because, Alex, we were chatting backstage about this. How do you think about pivots? How have you worked through it with companies? How do you think about an early stage founder who's already pivoted a couple times before you're talking to them?
Yeah. Actually, I was having this conversation a little bit with one of my companies last night. We had a board dinner of like, well, there's two questions here of like, how do you know when to pivot or what's the value of a pivot? And then I think it actually goes to where an investor can add value. I was telling them that I think if you're a board member in a company, you're usually you're more divorced from the details than the company. The only thing you can provide is a little perspective, like top-down perspective. Market perspective or just more of a macro view, a set of fresh eyes on what they're working on. So I generally think a board member or an early investor could provide 2 or 3 pieces of great advice through the life of a company. And I think one of those is when it's time to pivot, when you're just saying, hey, I've seen this, I don't know a lot of stuff, but I've seen this before, like it's not working. You're pushing on a string, it's just not gonna happen. And so I think having people around you that can give you that perspective of when it's not working, that's one. And then 2, for the importance of a pivot, I mean, I think almost, I don't wanna say every company I've invested in, but probably half of them at the early stages have pivoted and become successful.
What's one of the most crazy pivots that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this before, but we had a company that started as a mobile app company. This company now is called Hive AI, does content moderation, doing a lot of revenue anyway today. And they started as, if anyone's ever tried Omegle, the like random chat app, they started as an Omegle clone, then they became an Ask.fm clone, and then they became a Scale AI competitor today. And then now they do content moderation API. So they went from like consumer internet all the way to enterprise AI, and their moderation APIs are now best in class, better than Google. There's a little lineage to that because they had to do moderation on the consumer app, so they had to build those models. But I think that was like a really good lesson in tenacity. It's been 10 years, now they're doing, I won't out them now, but a lot of revenue. And I asked him once actually, like, what's the secret to startup success? And he said, I think 99% is just not giving up. And I think that's true. Like, one of the things we now filter for at the fund is, does this person have the tenacity to keep going? Because it's going to be easy to quit, start a new company, sell the company. Like, there's lots of times you can just give up. But honestly, if you just keep going, you don't take no for an answer, and you're willing to pivot and try new things, it kind of usually does work. Like, that's the weird thing I've learned about startups.
Anyone else have any really fun pivots?
Just want to say something about pivots, maybe that may be helpful for folks. But I think you're totally right that our role is sometimes to just tell the founder it's not working, and I call that an intervention. So I'm like, I'm gonna have an intervention with this company, and I know that the reaction of the founder, it pisses me off because many people don't tell that to the founder. They want to be founder friendly and not say it. And you're hurting because they're just burning your cash. So when you know, you should have this conversation. And they go to the 5 stages of grief, which is denial, and they get upset. And I'm like, dude, the sooner we get to acceptance, the faster we're gonna move, So, but it's natural because you're grieving your company, right? And that's what goes through their mind. But I find that, you learn. I mean, we are making these decisions about marrying somebody through a few meetings, right? It's really hard to get it right. But when you've worked with a company for 6 months, you have a lot of information about that company, and you should absolutely rethink, right? Is this the founder we should pivot, or should we call it a day, right? And I think that's maybe tough, but it's the right thing for the fund, for the founder, for everybody. Not everybody deserves to pivot. That's, the way I would say it.
I also think pivot many times gets used as a dirty word, but it's actually a great learning opportunity. Like, even listening to the Hive story, there was some continuity in what they learned at each stage of their evolution as a business. And so I do think a lot of times it gets thrown around as that, oh gosh, they pivoted 3 times. I view that as the faster you pivot, the faster you're iterating. And so I would say, I think, famously YC founders pivot all the time, right? Like, I think I've invested in, a dozen companies, of which more than half have pivoted along the way.
I think the pivoting is also correlated to this founder trait that we were talking about, this like truth-seeking mentality. Mm-hmm. And I think that at the end of the day, one thing that I share with a lot of founders, my friends who start companies, and we talk about when you're starting out on the journey, what's something to be aware of. And I think one of the things that hits you on the startup journey is there's a lot of people who are incentivized to tell you what you want to hear, especially when you first get to Silicon Valley. And I think that's investors. I think that's potential employees. I think that's employees after they join the company. There's sort of a lot, customers, by the way. I was chatting with a couple of juniors at Columbia who are starting a company, and they're telling me about their like product discovery journey and just all the people who told them how great their idea was until they figured out that it wasn't a good idea, right?
Show me your credit card.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's this like truth-seeking founder element. And so I think there's almost this reverse causation, which it's not that companies pivot and therefore they're successful. It's that the founders who are willing to pivot are the founders who are looking for the disconfirming evidence in every interaction that they have. And when they identify the disconfirming evidence, they change their thesis. And the thesis is coming from inside of them and is getting updated with new information. And that's why I think these companies pivot and ultimately become successful.
I mean, I always think examples are really helpful. So I invested in a young team, Jesse and Oshman, called Decagon now. And actually, most people didn't realize when they first started, they were not building a customer support company. They knew that they could use LMs to update information. They knew they wanted to do something operational within companies. And they went and interviewed, I'm not kidding, over 100 customers. And across all these different buyers, they spoke to people in customer support, in sales, across ops. And at a certain point, they had an opportunity to build a company that could have been more RPA-oriented and a company that could have been more customer support-oriented. And what did they do? They listened to the customers. They listened to the research and saw where the pull was and where they could have a differentiation in the product. And that's the direction they decided to build the company. And so a lot of times people start with a grand idea, but actually the reality is you have to build to what David said is a specific use case where you deliver value to somebody. And listening to the customer and iterating towards that direction many times can lead to a great result. Well, along those lines, someone asked, how do you decide which company to back when there are a dozen AI startups with good founders doing exactly the same thing? This example said AI customer support, but we're going to use different examples. But in crowded markets where seemingly the demand pool is there and there's great teams chasing it, how do you decide who to back?
I mean, I always ask the founder, whenever I encounter a company in this category, I always ask the founder the same question. So I'll share with this audience, which is, hey, you know that there's 12 companies in this space. Why did you decide to start this company? I think if the founder has a compelling reason why they're going to win and why this time is going to be different, then I think you can see the path. But the founder needs to articulate that. And so I think some companies do have a differentiated strategy, and you'll see some categories where there were 12 companies and food delivery. There were a lot of companies. DoorDash won. The unit economics were better. They had a differentiated model. They were starting in the suburbs. There were reasons why DoorDash was going to work and these other companies weren't. If your thesis is, hey, I'm smarter than the other 11, I think that's a lot harder.
Yeah, I actually think that the founder is the truth at the end of the day. So we're backing founders. And I asked the same question, why would you do it knowing what the market looks like? And an answer that is not good is the market is big enough that there could be two of us. I'm like, okay, no, that's not good. But the founder actually is able to explain why, and it's believable. I think that's who you want to go back. And I think sometimes we don't have the time to meet every founder. Ideally, if there's 12 companies, you would meet the 12 founders, and then you can, understand what the lay of the land is. But, otherwise you just have to use your pattern recognition from other companies. What state am I backing the top 1% person? That's it can't be FOMO.
Nothing to add, yeah.
Yeah.
The last thing I'd say is a lot of people talk about product market fit. I talk about founder market fit, which is sometimes does this founder have a unique domain expertise where they get to shortcut the customer research phase of building because they already know the answer because they're building for themselves. Sometimes it could be a product that's very prosumer and bottoms up, and the founder's got a secret superpower of distribution. And so a lot of times I ask founders of what is your superpower? And then I try to see if it triangulates what they're trying to build. And so that's a good question as you were thinking about. I'm curious actually, what phase are most people at? Who's a founder in the room? Oh, okay, so the vast majority of the room. Who's at the pre-seed stage? Seed? A? Plus? Okay, mostly early stage. But I think that's a really good question to ask yourself because you don't have to be better at everything. You have to be spiky in one thing. And so self-identifying what you're really good at, it could be talent, it could be distribution, it could be iterating really fast. Matching that to your end market can help a lot. So maybe let's switch over to, I love founder stories or why you invest in certain companies. And someone asked earlier too, what's the most controversial investment or unconventional investment you ever made? And what did you see in the deal to make that decision? We'll start with Alex.
I think controversial is the
What's
key word there. So,
controversial?
well, I'll use a broad definition, but in 2017, we invested in this company called Anduril. We were talking about this backstage, which most people know it's a defense company, counter-drone warfare, now a bunch of other verticals as well. And internally, back then, today, defense tech is more in vogue, I'd say. It's, you have people are talking about the Gundo in LA, where everyone's trying to start a defense company. And it's much more popular. I think given geopolitical realities, people understand the need for, I think, Silicon Valley to be involved in defense. But in 2017, that wasn't true. You had Google actually exiting their DARPA contract, I think it was, because of an employee revolt internally. So really defense was, something you didn't touch, and most people didn't want to work at a defense company. And so we were the first outside money in Anduril in 2017. And actually the internal discussion was, this is so controversial, I think there's a 10% chance the firm gets protested, and then no one will ever work with us again, and we can never do deals again. And so somebody voted a rare 0 on that deal because they thought it's an existential threat to the fund. And we've never had a vote like that ever in APC where we thought actually there was some huge blow-up risk to doing it. And so that's probably the most controversial one. And it's funny today to see the, change. Andreessen now has a effectively defense fund, and I think Andreessen is the pinnacle of marketing, so it's got to be a real thing now. And it's just funny to me to see that people are advertising investing in defense when we were literally which newspaper is this going to be on the front of, and how bad is that going to be for us? So that was it.
Well, it sounds like that one has really paid off, so congratulations.
It worked
Great early
out very
bet.
well, but it was not obvious at the time.
Yeah, we don't have a vote system, so I don't know if everything, if Peshwan and I don't agree, maybe it's controversial just by that statement. But, we are very founder-led, so meaning we really try to spend a lot of time with the founders and back the founder. So when we started the fund, we backed this guy called Helmi El-Tuki. He did his PhD with me, and I knew he was very, very smart. And, we backed a biotech company. I think we were Fund 1, and our LPs were, what are you doing backing a biotech company? For those fund managers that have Fund 1, you're trying to prove everything goes to thesis. So anyway, so we still did it. I'm not a biologist, but now I know enough about biotech that that can be dangerous. So that would be maybe controversial, at least to our LPs at the time. I would say it was also controversial when we invested in the Series B of DoorDash. We're a $50 million fund, and that Series B was 600, and the LPs were like, what are you doing? But when you have a good company, that's where you should do it. So anyway, so I think we've broken a lot of LP rules. More than partnership rules.
Yeah, I have some humility on this. I think all three of you are probably more audacious. Seed investors are intrinsically more audacious than growth investors. So I don't think I've done anything quite as contrarian as investing in Anduril in 2017. So congrats on that. I think as a growth investor, the thing that you do that's audacious is you pay the big prices, right? It's a competitive market out there. And so 2 examples stand out in my mind, which is I remember when we invested in Marqeta, a $2 billion valuation. We invested in Databricks. Also, I think it was a $2.6 billion valuation. And this was 2018 when those were really high valuations.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember getting a call and someone being, are you guys insane? What are you guys doing? And obviously we've all seen, the last 6 years, prices have only gotten higher and these companies compounded, and one is public, one is, very late stage. But I think that, as a growth investor, the audacious thing you have to do is sort of believe. And I think that all growth stage investments come down to some belief about what the 10-year compounded growth rate is. How is this going to be growing in 7 years, right? And if you get that right, then you can make an audacious bet. And if you get that wrong, you're going to look like an idiot. And so I just think that tension is something that we think about a lot. And I think that's also a tension that is useful for founders to think about, because as you think 7 years out, what is the growth rate going to be? That also affects how you should capitalize the business, how you should run the business, what are the operating margins of the business. The way that you run the business is different.
I saw a lot of questions in here about how do you run your firm, and being an early stage investor, you have to be unconventional and right. That is actually how you make the real venture returns. And I'll tell one little story. back when I was like a lonely little 23-year-old, I was like, oh man, I'm so excited about this mobile transition. You know, it kind of, I mean, now it feels bigger, but kind of feels like the AI platform shift right now. It's like, I'm going to find every mobile company out there. And I had the wrong thesis that led me to the right idea, which is I was like, enterprise mobile is going to be a thing. And when I met 100 companies, I was like, wow, this is not going to be a thing because Workday is just going to add a mobile app and Salesforce is going to add a mobile app and it's just a platform extension. But then I was like, wait, who doesn't have Salesforce or Workday? People who are deskless workers. And then I spent all my time chasing people in weird vertical markets. And that's actually how I found ServiceTitan back in 2013. It was 2 Armenian young founders who were first kids in their families go to college, building an app for their plumbing dads. And who ever thought when you brought a plumbing software company into your partnership in 2013 that that would ever get approved? But that was the reality. It was quirky, it was weird, it was an opportunity for a new system of record. And the consensus back in the day was that vertical markets were too small for software. Not enough buyers, and the spend was low because they didn't have mobile. There was no way for them while they were on the go to actually use software. And the markets multiplied in big part due to fintech and a lot of Marketo is a big contributor, actually. And so now, I mean, it's kind of a fun time. Like ServiceTitan is probably going to be the mega IPO for the end of this year. But back in the day, it had to be weird. And so I would encourage a lot of people in the room, it's okay to be weird. In fact, we like it when you're weird, because we are weird too. And to the question earlier of like, hey, how do you decide between 12 founders in a room? Actually, we really like it when someone goes in an opposite path. Awesome. All right. Let's see. We got a couple more minutes left. Let me try to hit a couple more of these questions. Okay. So I'm curious. A lot of the questions around how do VC firms work and make decisions, and that's always a big question I get a lot too. So maybe let's go down. We'll start with David. How do you decide to approve a deal?
Yeah, so Sequoia is a partnership, and so we sit around. I think it actually is a bit of the stereotype. What people think happens in Silicon Valley actually happens at Sequoia. And so you have a bunch of people sitting around a table. Often the founder will come in on Monday morning. They'll present their idea, and we'll sit around. We'll have a memo that will go out on the Friday before the weekend. So we all read the materials ahead of the pitch. We listen to the pitch, and then we'll have a discussion around the company, and we'll have a vote on the company. And we try to have different opinions. We try to debate these things out. And I think one thing that maybe is underappreciated is if you have 1 or 2 people who are really convicted in a company, that is often enough to get over the line. So it's not a consensus-driven model. It's not the case that everyone has to like the company. And so I think it's about having a few people who are passionate, who have conviction, who see the vision that the founder sees. And it's their job to educate the partnership around what that looks like so that we can get conviction to move forward.
Yeah, you know, we are, it used to be when we started Pair, both Pashman and I had to say yes. And, you know, when I'm a little data-driven person, so I'm always looking back. And one of the things I've observed that our biggest misses was when one of us wanted to do it and the other one did not want to do it. So we switched, and we're now totally conviction. If somebody's pounding the table, especially at seed, that's when you should do it. In fact, if you have a big partnership, there's enough people around the table, you'll never do it because there's always a reason not to do it or 100 reasons not to do it. And it's almost like, what do you need to believe for it to actually be something? So we've changed to conviction-based. And even now that we have more partners, there's no more than 4 people in the room when we make that decision because, again, I believe that more people in the room means less risk and less creativity.
I'll say one aside, and then I'll just talk about how it works at APC. But if you're interested, there's a good book that was written in the 90s, 1999, called E-Boys, where it's like this really cool piece of lore and venture that a lot of people don't know about, where, I forget, New York Times reporter, some magazine, some newspaper, was able to sit in the benchmark partner meetings in like 1999 to 2001. And really cool book to read. You can see the discussions they have, how they made their decisions. Like, it's pretty cool. I mean, I don't even know how that happened, but it's like a unique snapshot we got in time. She does kind of point to, you'll see it was a lot crazier back then. Like eBay went public in 12 months after founding, like stuff that doesn't happen today. But at APC, we have a 7-person there's process where you meet with us, we'll do diligence. That diligence is shared with the whole team. We do calls every 2 days to sync up on every deal that's live. Everything culminates in a final presentation, and then we all vote. there's 7 people on the investment committee. You need 4 of the 7. And then every partner gets 1 silver bullet per fund if they want. And those like almost uniformly always perform the worst. So like people have actually stopped using them. And it's very rare things die at the vote stage. They usually die before, where the diligence didn't make sense or the questions weren't answered, and the consensus became, okay, this is not a good opportunity. So it gives you a little window that like, you can have one person often push a deal through, especially if you have a lot of clout. But you do, at APC anyway, have to get everybody else sort of convinced somewhat too. But people do defer to others' judgment, especially in areas they have expertise in.
So we're a 3-person partnership and believe very much in the conviction model. So while we all believe we have to know about the company, meet the founder, spend time, we believe in a single trigger because we think at the early stage, outliers would generate great returns. And so we want controversial deals. And from my time at Bessemer and actually at Andreessen too, it was the most controversial deals that ended up being typically the highest returners. All right, super last question, rapid fire. What is your favorite product that most people don't know about it? I'm gonna start with David.
This is one that people know about, but I'm still gonna pump it up anyways. And I'm not an investor in this company. I'm obsessed with Perplexity. I use Perplexity at least 20 times per day. I think it's a fantastic product, and I think the team behind that. It's an example of people think, oh, this is such a simple thing, and yet behind the hood, and I think this is what product is in AI, it's so delightful, and they understand the user so well. And so for people who haven't studied Perplexity, go check out Perplexity and just study how they've designed that product, because I think it's really brilliant.
Okay, it has to be a product that people don't know, right?
Generally don't know.
Yeah, hard
As
time.
David already broke my rule in the first
People know
answer.
about Perplexity. I was saying backstage that my favorite product is my little heater that I, take around with me around the house because it allows me to have my own microclimate. So that's my product. But, I've been using, I'm putting a plug for one of my companies that is, maybe people don't know, but it's called Clarify, and it's one of these meeting transcribers, but there's a tooling around it that allows us to converse around the meeting, and that has changed the way we run our company. So I'm putting a plug for them.
Okay, I'll give one everyone kind of knows about that I spend all my time on now. I love Polymarket. It's like the best. I have views on the most esoteric things happening now, which is like really funny. News event comes up, you're like, who did they select for Treasury? And then the one probably you haven't heard of, I don't know, this is a weird one, but I like this thing called Fight Camp, if anyone's ever tried it. It's like Peloton, but for boxing and kickboxing. It's like good workout. You get your sort of like aggression out a little bit.
I do not want to be on the other side of a deal with you. That sounds terrifying. All right, so Mark kind of took mine. I was actually going to say granola because I love their transcription and being able to talk to their chatbot to understand, everything. And
You gotta try my company.
All right, I'm gonna try yours too. But I'll throw in a second one, which is I actually love Blockit, which many people have already probably seen. It's like a calendaring AI assistant. But I have not hired an EA, and I probably take 30 meetings a week. And so check it out. All right, well, big round of applause for everyone on the panel. Thank you so much.